staff, and there she comes waltzing through the front door at 9 a.m., and I got a picture with her, and she's a very nice lady.
Yes, she is. I actually had an interview with her live with the Riverside Chamber of Commerce. That's how I met her in person, and then her chief of staff was giving her all the information about the show, and he said she listened to it. I don't know if that's true, but I'm not gonna but that's okay. I think
we'll take her word for it.
Yeah,
I think
she's trustworthy.
Absolutely. So we're going to let you take command. We are using the new microphones that I showed you today.
Sounds great.
And so yeah, we hope it does sound good. I mean, we went to the expensive ones, and they look awesome, and it's great. Oh, and just a little bit before we start, the company that we work for is now going to put us in the IA show at the booth as a radio station.
I heard that they have now they're going to have Radio Row, I understand.
Well, the IA wants us to do that too, but Toro wants us to put a mock studio in their booth.
Oh, inside the booth.
Yeah. Right. So we're gonna do both.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
We'll be able to have people just kind of stop by and chat with them and be live on the air and talk about, really exciting irrigation stuff.
Absolutely. And then Thursday night we do a live broadcast as well. So we're going to be very excited. So Inge, I'm going to turn it over to you and your
guest.
Yes, I was going to give the guest a compliment, but I'll let Inge do that.
Yes, well, I agree. We do have an outstanding guest tonight, Natalie Jacuzzi. Natalie, I believe you're on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you for calling in and joining us this evening so I can give our listening audience a little bit of background about you. Actually, I met Natalie a couple of weeks ago at a rather exciting conference in Davis concerning Israeli and California scientists on the topic of irrigation. And I was so impressed with her, I invited her to be on the show tonight. So Natalie is an environmental scientist with the Fertilizer Research and Education Program, and that's a program within our CDFA, California Department of Food and Ag. She's a senior environmental scientist and leads the FREP grant program in coordination with other scientists to, quote-unquote, ensure that projects pertain to research on best management practices and outreach and education related to use of fertilizing materials and nitrate loading to groundwater and surface water resources, quote-unquote. So those who have joined the show in the past know that in agriculture, our agriculture is great. It's producing the food, fuel, and fiber that we all need as humans to survive. But we have some issues in agriculture as well, and people like Natalie are helping us overcome them. So the FREP program funds and facilitates research to advance the environmentally safe and agronomically sound use and handling of fertilizing materials, and helps the growers and the ag supply and service professionals as well. Before that, Natalie was the nutrient and irrigation efficiency scientist with Buchanan Associates and was doing some science work out in the field, monitoring soil and crop conditions, tracking soil nutrients at various steps, so kind of hands-on in the field work. And then prior to that, she was a field researcher with Cal State University Monterey Bay on the Central Coast, also doing more kind of in the field, geeky soil and water stuff that we irrigation people do. So welcome to the show, Natalie. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, Natalie, as we spoke at the conference, we know that there are very few people in general that work in agriculture. It's a very small part of the population that grows all of our food. And there's even a smaller sliver of those people in ag who are women. And so I'm always very excited to meet a dynamic young scientist like you in the field. And so tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up working in agriculture.
So thank you so much for the compliment. I also feel the same as you. I feel like there are a lot of women who work in agriculture, and it's important that we come to the forefront and that we talk about it because it is our experience. And it's great. It was great meeting you at the BARD conference as well, and that we could talk about these things. So a little bit about my background is that I actually did my undergraduate research thesis project on plant diversity in redwood ecosystems. I originally had a little bit of a focus on on entomology, but I ended up actually going into plant identification, and that was sort of my first exposure to plant science, soil science sort of concepts. And I ended up doing as you said, my graduate thesis research at Cal State University, Monterey Bay. My focus actually there on my thesis research was something called managed aquifer recharge. I'm not sure if you guys have talked about this on the show much.
A little, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. So what we actually did was we would build percolation ponds in the field, and they would be 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, and we would instrument the ponds heavily, and we would reinforce them, and then we would pump water into the ponds at a measured rate, and then we would collect all the data, using temperature sensors, things like that, data loggers, and then try to model how much of the water actually went vertical and how much went lateral. And this was really important at the time because, it's always important in California, but we were in the middle of a drought, and we were doing these tests in all sorts of sites. And this was really the first time I actually worked with growers. And we would go to meetings, and we would look for volunteers who were willing to offer up their land for us to do this research and sort of be in their way. And growers were really willing to help they were very much hit on the Central Coast with drought issues because the Central Coast, I think we refer to it sort of as water independent. They're not on the State Water Project, and they're not on the Central Valley Water Project where I was working in the Pajaro Valley. So growers offered up their land, and they offered up their time and, some of their workers as well to help us do these percolation tests to look at the potential for managed aquifer recharge in areas of the Central Coast. And I did this research under the tutelage of Dr. Andy Fisher at UC Santa Cruz and Dr. Mark Los Huertos, who was at Monterey Bay at the time, and he is now at Cal Poly Pomona. So that was my first exposure to growers. And after I graduated, not a lot of managed aquifer recharge projects happening because of the drought. But since I was intimately familiar with how water sort of moves through the vadose zone, moves through soil, I started working with growers on, for Buchanan Associates. We were actually sort of co-contractors with Buchanan Associates, H2 Horticulture Services as well. And so we all worked with growers on irrigation and nutrient planning. And I helped serve as the mobile irrigation lab for the Pajaro Valley, for the Loma Prieta RCD, and then we would also work for growers individually as the mobile irrigation lab doing distribution uniformity tests all through the Salinas Valley down to King City.
Wow, so you actually started with redwood trees.
Yeah, I did. It did.
Kind of in an ecosystem forestry environment, and then ended up in good old agriculture.
Yes, correct. It was my first exposure for plants, and then that was kind of where I went from there.
Ah, well, that's great. Now, we didn't actually talk about that a couple weeks ago, so that's very interesting. And yes, we have been talking about managed recharge here on the show a bit. We had, I think Don Cameron was on sometime last year, and he's kind of the poster child of the farmer, that is trying to use the excess water that's available in the wintertime, recharge, and then efficiently irrigate, say, with drip or sprinklers during the growing season when water is not so available. So, and that's something we need to do more of in the state, and I think we have a real concerted effort.
It's definitely, managed aquifer recharge is definitely a growing topic these days. It just wasn't particularly at the moment when I graduated, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, you've got a great role now. You're in a public role rather than a private, like with the consulting company that you were with before. So at CDFA, you're in downtown Sacramento. You're administering, a large grant program that many people apply for to fund their research and their activities. Tell us a little bit more about it and what CDFA hopes to accomplish by expending this money on these grants.
So you gave a really great summary of the kind of research that FREP has funded over the years, and again, FREP stands for the Fertilizer Research and Education Program. The program does fund research on the environmentally safe and agronomically sound use of fertilizers, And overall, the program really wants to do everything it can to promote the agronomically sound and environmentally safe use of fertilizers, but also really just seeks to achieve that in a variety of ways. So the grant program has been around for about 25 years, and over those years, it has funded over 220 projects and has allocated over $17 million in funding.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really great. If you go to our website, you can actually see a list of all of our projects broken out by parts of the state and topics. And all of those projects really do have a nutrient efficiency component. And as we were talking about, nutrient efficiency is so important and interlinked with irrigation efficiency. Yep. So all of those projects do also have an irrigation efficiency component as well, whether it's just measuring the volume of water they're applying or seeing if they can be more efficient with that irrigation. And that's really been the two cruxes of the project over time. And over those 25 years, the program has really accrued a lot of knowledge about agricultural systems. I mean, granted, agriculture in California is actually relatively fast-moving, obviously. We have crops that become really popular and then crops that sort of change production. And so we have to keep up with that as the demand changes. But over the past few years, the program has really concentrated on taking that wide breadth of research and disseminating those findings, and then also the findings of other programs that research the similar topics to practitioners and agronomists and the people in the field. So not just having that research, sitting in a peer-reviewed journal article somewhere to never be read or just be read to inform the next round of research. So we really want this to be applicable to growers. So in the past 5 years, we've been funding a lot more outreach projects. And we've been, for example, a lot of this research has informed something called a Certified Crop Advisor training. And this is a training that pulls from all that research it has a nitrogen management focus, because that is the focus of the program. And it's a 1.5-day program for certified crop advisors. And once they complete this training, they can certify nitrogen management plans for growers all across the Central Valley. And through this program, we have trained over 900 CCAs with that focus on nitrogen management. So that's been one of the outreach arms, really, one of the ways that we've done that. But that curriculum has also been developed into it's a half-day training for growers, and growers can go through this training now as well. It's a little bit more crop-specific, and it's also tailored to growers, so it's a little bit different. But growers who now go through the grower nitrogen management training program can certify their own nitrogen management plans as well. And as you guys know, there's tens of thousands of growers across the state of California, and certified crop advisors. There's only about 1,100 or 1,200 certified crop advisors. So it's really important that we offer these services to growers as well. And so over 3,000 growers are now trained through this program and can self-certify their own nitrogen management plans.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, you had a question, sorry.
Well, this half-day program, is that in person, or is it e-learning, or
It
online?
is in person. And
it is in person, okay.
Yes, correct. And since it is a shorter program and it is more tailored to specific crops and that nitrogen management plan, there is a test at the end. But our pass rate is pretty high. And we have really good, the trainers for the nitrogen management training for growers they're certified crop advisors who have gone through the training, but then they've also gone through the curriculum. We've all built it together. They've built the test with us, and they've given us a lot of feedback. And we've all really worked together with CCAs and with growers and cooperative extension and researchers to really develop this curriculum so that it's really tailored for growers and what they need to know about nitrogen management. And so that's been really successful. And then the last thing I wanted to say more in what our grant program does as well is we're not just a grant program. We also, in the past few years, we have partnered with cooperative extension, and most recently we partnered with cooperative extension and the Monterey Resource Conservation District and American Farmland Trust, and we actually applied for a grant. which sounds funny. We're a grant program that applied for a grant. But what happens is that we get proposals, and they have a lot of potential, and they have a lot of legs, and maybe they don't fit exactly into what the fertilizer research and education program fits into, or maybe they just needed more cooperators, and also we can offer sort of matching funds. So we applied for a grant to do outreach and education for irrigators and farm workers at all levels on the Central Coast with irrigation training and demonstration projects. So we received that funding, and we're now going into the third year of that project. So yeah, we're a grant program, but we also can apply for other grant programs as well.
I bet you knew kind of the inside track on how to write a grant, since you probably reviewed hundreds
I was
of
not
them.
as familiar coming from the private sector. But we do have, we have, my supervisor is he is a CCA, and he has applied for grants in his previous careers and things like that. And, we're always learning. So I think it's good that we're also, keeping the pulse on other programs as well, because we want to improve the program as well. And so that learning process is always there.
Well, you're absolutely right. There are tens of thousands of growers in the state, and 8 or 9 million irrigated acres that produce our food, and for the whole country and the world, to that matter. And yet there's very few people who are qualified to help the growers manage their irrigation and water. So it sounds like your program is helping not necessarily just the growers, but the service community, like the PCAs and the cooperative extension folks, do the outreach that's necessary.
Yes, that is our goal. We want to get to everyone at every level and see where we can make the biggest impact.
Yeah, well, $17 million and 900 PCAs, that's a good dent. But as you know, we talked about that a little bit in Davis, that there still is a gap, and we need to do even more, because we know that a lot of that irrigation that's occurring today could probably be done a little more efficiently. And maybe you can give some examples of how grant recipients have used the process to improve their methods, or positively impact ag in general. And maybe for our listening audience, they may not even we've talked about it a little bit on past shows, but just review what problem we're trying to fix with this. People may not necessarily know that along with irrigation, that sometimes we're leaching nutrients into the groundwater that we don't want to.
Yeah, so that is the main goal of our program, is to minimize nitrate leaching into groundwater. Nitrate does move with irrigation water. It moves with water. It can enter into groundwater systems, but it can also enter into surface water as well. So it can enter through tile drains. And our program wants to minimize those impacts to the environment. That's where the phrase environmentally safe and agronomically sound comes in.
Because it hurts the fish and and actually people
absolutely.
too, right? Yeah.
Yes, it hurts fish. It can hurt people. It has those potentials. But also, I think as the Department of Food and Agriculture, we really want to help our growers be sustainable into the future, because that nitrate leaving your field, it's not a huge cost, but the irrigation water to pump and paying for the labor to, pay for someone to inject that fertilizer, that's all money lost every time you lose those resources and those inputs. So it's a win-win if our agricultural systems become more efficient over time,
right,
and they have
right.
become more efficient over time.
Yep.
And growers have gotten really good at adapting and are consistently producing more yield with less inputs or the same amount of inputs, which
Yep.
has been really impressive. And our program, I can't take credit for that, obviously, across the state of California. But I think the goal of our project is to always have, and the goal of FREP is always to have some sort of long-term implications that positively contribute to agriculture overall. And I just wanted to talk about some of the highlighted projects that people might be aware of, but might not be aware that our program funded it. And one of them is Crop Manage. We talked about this at the BARD conference. And I don't think most people, and that's not the intention, is that most people know that we funded it, but it's been a really successful project that FREP did originally fund.
Oh,
and
that's Dr. Michael Kahn,
yes,
right?
Yes,
yeah.
So that is a tool that was made by Dr. Michael Kahn on the Central Coast, and it was to help growers schedule and record their irrigation and nutrient fertilization planning.
Oh, I didn't know you funded that. Yeah, that's a great program. Yeah, that's talked about quite a bit and used quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, that's great to hear. So yeah, Michael Kahn, it was really successful because FREP funded the original crop. So you guys are you're familiar with it, and hopefully your audience is a little bit familiar with it. But if you're not, basically it helps you manage and schedule out in real time irrigation and fertilization scheduling for any crop at any time of the year. It uses soil data. It uses from Surgo, which goes through Soil Web at UC Davis. It also uses CIMMYS data, spatial CIMMYS, and it can give you estimates of irrigation and fertilization scheduling for each crop, and even a lot of times sub-varieties. And it was really successful, but I think the biggest measure of the success of that when we talk about positively contributing to agriculture and the long-term implications is that it's been so successful that it's actually generated interest from industry. And now that the program has invested in establishing Crop Manage, industry members are coming to Michael and saying, we would really like this crop to be offered, or we would really like this crop to be added to Crop Manage. And I think that that's a really good proxy for a successful project, is that,
Absolutely.
yeah, is that agriculture sees value in it.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, to have people wanting you to do more work on it.
Exactly. And they're willing to fund it, so they're willing to put their own money forth. And that's the ultimate demonstrated value. So Almond Board has come forth and shown interest. I know that the Pepper Commission has shown interest, and so hopefully those crops will be offered in the near future. And I think we just talked to a couple of researchers as well about adding a couple more permanent crops to Crop Manage.
Very good.
So yeah, when industry invests and decides to invest in expanding a project that FREP originally funded, I think that's a great example of it demonstrating value and really having a sustainable intrinsic value to the industry over time, and that industry has identified it, that it's going to continue to have value and continue to grow and sort of be self-sustaining.
Well, the almond board probably represents the largest crop in the state in terms of water footprint and probably nitrogen footprint as well. So
and it's not just because they're particularly large water and nitrogen users. It's just that there's over 1 million acres in production at this point.
Right.
So it's a huge impact crop. So even the slightest increase in efficiency can have much larger implications.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing that tool is going to be expanding. I think another project that was interesting, speaking of almonds, is that recently FREP has funded a project looking at salinity's impact on root development in almond trees. And I think that this is a really particularly important when we're talking about irrigation, because California is a region that does periodically go through drought, and we have many different regions that have different kinds of water quality issues, have different water accessibility issues, water quantity issues, and it can be difficult to manage water efficiency, especially just with increasing salt concentrations, and also while minimizing nitrate leaching. And I think that that's a balance that growers can struggle with, understandably, is reducing your nitrate leaching while still managing salinity in the root zone and not trying to have those impacts expressed, because by the time it gets into the tree, it can be too late.
Yeah, that's kind of a conflicting goal. You don't want water to go below the root zone in order to safeguard runoff water or the groundwater, and yet you need to leach salt out of the root zone. So how do you get rid of the salts but not the nitrogen? It's a really difficult challenge, and I remember working with growers on this. It can be very difficult, and so this project really looks at what is the tolerance of these trees, and also how does it really affect the root development, because that root development, if we can understand that, will eventually translate to yield, it will translate to tree development, and hopefully in the long term we'll have a better understanding of what this tolerance is, and potentially this is a very ambitious project, and we're all rooting for them, that they're going to have some best management practices for really how to balance that in almond trees, but then also even looking at a couple other crops as well, because permanent crops
can behave similarly. And this is another project that also has been funded by other boards who caught wind of it and said, oh, we want to know what this does for our crop as well.
Wow.
So this is another really successful project that's had some demonstrated value.
Well, those are some great examples.
Yeah, and then I think the last one is the fertilization guidelines. I think that's the biggest thing that our program is known for. These are guidelines that have been put together for 29 crops, and they provide nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They're guidelines for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilization for those crops over the course of their life cycle or over the course of the cropping cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And our fertilization guidelines now cover over 80% of irrigated agriculture in California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so they're really comprehensive. They're based on literature reviews of peer-reviewed research that has been done in California or similar climates. And the most valuable thing that I show growers or anyone really who, whenever we're discussing our outreach materials, is that there's nitrogen uptake curves, and it has it on, again, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. There's deficiency symptoms. It's a really comprehensive description of each of these crops and management based on peer-reviewed research. So that, I think, has been a really successful project as well, and is continuing to grow. Obviously, as we start to get into the smaller crops, with each crop addition, it's not like, oh, this was 10% of the acreage. It's like, oh, this was 1.5%. So we could grow really quickly initially, but as we add more crops, obviously the progress will slow a little bit, but will still be hopefully impactful and positive for agriculture.
Well, I mean, what do we grow here in California? Probably 300 plus crops, and 29 is maybe a tenth of them. But I bet it represents most of the acreage because. Yes,
but still, that's the goal. I think it's with the number that we circulate is usually over 400 crops. And I wouldn't argue with that. I completely believe that we grow over 400 crops. But yeah, the acreages can be much smaller as you go through.
So the guidelines it's probably kind of like a prescription, for farmers.
Yes.
How much do peaches actually use in the on the east side per year, so that we don't over fertilize? I mean, I think the tendency is for people to use more. If a little is good, then more is better. And actually, that's not true, but it's a myth. But people do that, and they over fertilize. And so here we have guidelines now that can help direct people.
Yeah, and that can happen, and then the opposite can happen. I think there was a research project that was funded where they were using Crop Manage in the lower Central Valley or Central Coast, and they found that Crop Manage actually recommended more nitrogen for some of the strawberry growers who are growing it. So it can go either way because sometimes it's a cost to input, and you don't want unhealthy crops as well. So I think just being more informed overall is good, and this is based on peer-reviewed research. But obviously, every grower should make their own decisions based on also like their experience.
Sure.
They know their land the best, they know their crops the best, they know their soil the best. But it's nice to have at least a starting point and a starting point for that discussion.
Absolutely. Same with an irrigation scheduling recommendation. It's a starting point, and then we go monitor and look and see what the crop is actually doing and if it's reacting the way we wanted. Well, those are some great examples. Thank you. I'm going to dig into your website a little bit more and discover even more.
Yeah,
but
I can't tell you the HTML, so just Google CDMA prep.
Sounds good. Well, I also wanted to touch on a statement that you made at the conference. You were saying that when you were a consultant on the Central Coast, that you could practically see what was wrong with the farm before you even got out of the pickup. So, just visually, you can see what's going on, and I know I've spoken before of my friend Keith Backman at Delaval Labs, who is called out on, as the plant doctor to farms, basically to assess what's wrong with this crop. And he says 80% of the time it's water. It's either over irrigation or under irrigation or inefficient or disuniform. So tell us from your perspective as a plant doctor, what were you seeing when you were in that role?
When I was on the Central Coast, and I was a consultant for about 5 years, and just to set the context, farming on the Central Coast is extremely fast-paced. You can have a grower who has a few thousand acres that they're responsible for. They're growing an assortment of crops that can be in the ground anywhere from 45 days to 2 years. So it's a constant struggle to fit moving pieces in, and there are always a million things happening on any farm. And not to mention, other pressures, market demand, timing, land leases is also a major difference as well, labor and regulations. And so the list just goes on. So I always went onto farms knowing that and knowing about those and trying to be perceptive and respectful of those issues as well. And so really the role of myself and my co-contractors and my co-consultants was to help growers in any capacity that they saw fit, and when it came to their fertilization and water use efficiency. So I think the biggest strength that we had was that we had a willingness to be in the field with the irrigators and with the growers and with the farm workers at all levels, and really just helping them one-on-one with these issues. Because if you see it, the grower who goes there every single day also sees it, and they know, and they might just be overworked, or the irrigator might be overworked. And I think taking the time and slowing down really was a strength for our team. And I think that just having that ability to listen and to work hard, because farming is really hard work.
Yeah.
And really respecting that and being willing to put in, those long days. I mean, I know that myself and my co-contractors would go out in the morning, sometimes at 3:30, 4 in the morning, and we wouldn't be done until the sun went down at 9 o'clock at night in the summer. So it was really about, I think, having the ability to listen to what the growers wanted, and then the growers identifying what they wanted help with. And myself and my fellow consultants were there to assist, so we had a really good swath of sort of expertise. I worked with Marcus Buchanan, who is a PhD agronomist and very knowledgeable about many of the Central Coast crops. And he had pretty much worked with most of the Central Coast growers at one time or another over a long period of time. And I learned everything I knew from Michael Johnson, who is an irrigation specialist. He's H2 Horticultural Services, and he had worked in irrigation for over a decade on landscape irrigation and ag irrigation. And he had really been in the field, and he had repaired every single irrigation system like you could even imagine. We would get out of the truck and we would go repair an irrigation system that wasn't even on a field that we were working on, because that stuff happens.
Yes.
And sometimes we did honestly just get jobs because someone saw us in a neighboring block being like, those people are super muddy, and they're willing to get out of their truck and go repair this line that's broken and is spraying everywhere.
Yeah.
So really just taking the time to really be thoughtful and listen and have the expertise. And also, we don't know everything. In fact, we don't know most things. So a lot of these growers are overworked, and they know what they need, and they know what they need more time for. And like you said, a lot of times it can be the irrigation system. And growers would call us and they would say, my field's looking funny, and I don't know what it is, but let's see if it's the irrigation system. And a lot of times it was, whether it was installation or whatever, tape that was out of spec. But I think that that's a good service, is to put growers, give growers peace of mind that they have someone that they can call when that kind of stuff goes wrong. Because, I think a couple times they would say to me, I don't know who I would call if it wasn't you guys.
And you may not know the answer right away either, but at least you are knowledgeable about the area and give somebody for them to talk to and work it through with them. Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of the conversations were that. They were just us working through. We would be sitting there staring at a sump, four of us, saying, where is this water coming from?
Yeah.
And we would just stare at it. And so that was something that I think, and then one of us eventually figured out, we'd be like, oh, this is transport time. This is obviously coming from here or whatever. But it was having that time with the grower to think and brainstorm and listen. And honestly, that was a lot of the skills that I learned. I mean, obviously I have a background in soil science and hydrology, and I have a lot of that technical skills, but I really think I just leaned on my ability to listen, my ability to anticipate the need, and really just learn from others. And because, growers needed help, and they wanted assistance, and they just didn't have the time to do it, some of the stuff, because it's a very demanding, very competitive system on the Central Coast. And so
yeah, well, and you can't
niche.
and we can't expect growers to be the experts at everything. I mean,
No.
there's dozens of things that they need to know about, and they can't be the experts in irrigation and fertilization. So they need specialists, just like they have accountants and mechanics and other people. So
Exactly.
good on you guys for helping them out. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we have just a couple of minutes left, and yeah, it's fascinating. We might need to bring you back. But Rob and Chris, I think have.
No, we'd like Natalie and you to stay on the line, because I
Yeah.
have a topic, actually two quick questions, and that might lead to a few minute discussions. And I'm really impressed. You were playing her down. She's more than outstanding.
Yes,
Guess.
yeah.
Oh,
And
you
she's
guys are too nice.
and we can also say that she's outstanding in the field. We always have to play on that joke. So, do we have just a couple more minutes? For another question
Go
that
ahead.
I have?
Go on
Yeah,
question. And then we're going to go to commercial. Then we'll come back and we'll do the rest.
Okay, cool. I would love to know, Natalie, your impression of that BARD conference, the Binational Ag Research and Development Conference that we both attended a few weeks ago in Davis, where both scientists from Israel and California got together to try to tackle some of our, well, not tackle, but exchange information about our common water issues. What were your top takeaways from the conference?
I actually tried to go through my notes on that conference, and it's too many to even summarize in 3 days. It's 3 days worth of conversations, and I think you and I were in a lot of the same conversations where we were just, jotting down notes. But I think you've sort of touched on it. That conference was a really great opportunity for researchers and cooperative extension and farm advisors and industry to really come together with representatives from Israel and talk about regional water concerns, larger scale water issues, about quality and quantity. We learned about technology and research that's helping to address a lot of these issues, and just agricultural issues in general. And I think we learned a lot about Israel and them growing a lot of the similar crops, and also being a semi-arid climate. They have a lot of the similar irrigation systems. They are small, but they do face a lot of the similar issues to California, and I think we can have a lot to learn from each other, and we can have a lot of productive dialogues and brainstorming, and that's what a lot of those 3 days were. So I think in the 3-day summary, I would say overall, I think a theme was that in a lot of ways, agriculture is doing a really great job of being efficient and wants to be better, because there's really always room for improvement. And agriculture has been improving over time, and there's always that space for that. And it was also, I think you touched on it earlier, that conference was a great opportunity to start a dialogue between professionals to solve these issues, and that we really just can't remain in our own silos. We have to continue to have these conversations across industry and state and researchers.
Yep.
And there's a lot of pressures coming on agriculture from different directions, and I think that even now more than ever, it's really important that we work together to just reduce redundancy, and we're all working towards being more efficient or helping growers be more efficient irrigators, that we work together on this rather than, in our own aisles. And it's not just that we face a lot of the same issues with Israel, but also a lot of other countries that I think we can look to maybe not solve issues in the same way, but at least get some ideas and open a dialogue. And that was just really enlightening to me, that we talked about that. And I think, again, it just solidified that we have to be having these conversations more often. And so this sort of inspired me. My biggest take-home message is that, I joke that I think I say the word irrigation 45 times a day. But I came back, and I think now more than ever, we have an annual conference to present our research and have researchers come, and also industry as well, to talk about research that we funded, and then also more applied aspects of fertilizer management. And this year, we're going to have a panel discussion on irrigation efficiency on farms and irrigation technology. And a lot of that is because of the connections that I made at the BARD conference and a lot of those conversations that we had. And so I think that that's a good initiative that I took, and I think that I'm not the only person who took that away from that conference. I think a lot of people found good spaces for collaboration. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't go.
Exactly.
And be able to, pontificate about irrigation and
you wouldn't be on the water zone tonight. That's right.
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation, and I do, I don't want to stay in a silo and just saying irrigation over and over again. I want to lean on the strengths of other people and, their networking and their knowledge and just know what else is out there. And I think that that's going to take a lot of effort, and I think we're well primed for it. And I think that was a really good start to that whole conversation. Just we as researchers and technical support need to be more facilitative in that discussion, really.
Well, there you have it. We need to be cross-functional in the field, helping the farmers, and we need to be, looking at other countries, other states across the world to have these conversations and solve these problems. And that's exactly what that conference did, in my view, too. And Australia has similar issues, but has different solutions. So, we could talk more and more, but I know Rob and Chris have some other topics, and I think we need to go to commercials. So thank you, Natalie, and I hope you can stay on the line because Chris does have some very interesting things that he's going to talk about the last 10 minutes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we'll be back in just a minute. Got to go to our commercials. Anybody wants to call in and participate, it's 888-909-1050 or 909-792-5222. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292FQ Riverside, and K293CF Moreno Valley.
If you knew there was a pipe cement that works better than the one you're currently using, is better for you and the environment, and costs the same or less, would you buy it? Oh, no-brainer, right? Weldon, the trusted leader in solvent cements for over 60 years, is pleased to introduce a new line of solvent cements that does all that. Introducing the Eco Series line of solvent cements for PVC piping systems. Not only does it work great and set fast, it also has 30% lower solvent emissions and less smelly fumes, a better workplace environment when you're installing pipes. But don't just take our word for it. Eco Series products are the only solvent cements that are Green Seal certified for environmental innovation for effective performance, improved working conditions, and for use with potable water. Now available in a medium-bodied fat-setting blue formula, 905 Eco, and a regular-bodied fat-setting clear formula, 900 Eco. Pick up a can today from your local distributor and see, smell, and feel the difference, just like Joe Sweat, president of Sunrise Irrigation, did. He said, after using Weldon's 905 Eco, we immediately noticed the application was smooth and there was noticeably less odor than other blue solvent cements on the market. The guys love it. To learn more about eco-solvent cements from Weldon, visit the website at www.weldon.com or call the Technical Service Hotline at 877-477-8327. That's 877-477-8327.
Let's talk drought stress. No one likes burnt plants or grass, especially your customers. So when it's hotter than a tin roof in Tallahassee, what are you gonna do? Water the problem away? Not only does that abuse a vital resource, it's illegal in many cities. Here's a quick and easy solve that won't get you in trouble with Mother Nature or Johnny Law. Applied as a year-round program, Moisture Manager from Lesco supplements regular irrigation by attracting moisture to treated areas, thus making the moisture available to plant roots. This maintains wettability between waterings and rainfall, allowing soil to accept water as it becomes available, and making the water more accessible to the plant roots. Boom! More green, less watering, and a great new reason to see your customers on a recurring basis. With Lesco Moisture Manager and Site 1, high heat is no sweat.
Welcome back to the Water Zone, and I appreciate Natalie staying on with our best friend Ingy. Hey, a couple things. It's interesting to me, and I was telling Chris about it. Years ago, I worked for another company, and we made smart controllers, and they had a sod farm business, and they wanted to know how come on part of the territory that they were growing grass that it was doing really, really good. And in fact, much better than the other side. And what was interesting, on one side of the sod farm, they had power lines, high voltage power lines. And I was going to ask Natalie and or Ingi, have you ever been involved in any kind of experimentation or testing to show how, and I'm just so Natalie knows, my background's electronics and physics. So I'm very interested to know how the electricity in the air above the grass or crops can affect the growing of vegetation.
I can't. Oh, sorry, Ingi, you should go because I actually am not familiar.
No, I'm stumped. Rob, you stumped me for one.
Oh, you owe me a $50 gift card now.
No, I owe you lunch next time I'm in Riverside.
No, that's a...
Natalie, do you have any idea how power lines over crops affect?
I did work with sod growers. They were not near power lines.
No.
So.
Okay. Well, there's a new thing out. We'll go to a different subject then. It's called plant tattoos, and I was reading something from maybe you guys read it. It's called Successful Farming, if anybody's ever read that. And Iowa State University plant scientists are working with a low-cost graphene-based sensors that can be attached to plants. And the technology measures the time it takes for two kinds of corn plants to move water from their roots to their lower leaves and then to the upper leaves. And the information gathered is to provide new types of data to researchers and farmers. So what's exciting about that, once they can measure something, they can begin to understand it. So they first discovered this in 2004, where graphene is made from honeycomb sheets of carbon, and it's just one atom thick. And its properties are exciting researchers because they are strong and stable, thin, almost completely transparent, they're extremely light, and an amazing conductor of electricity and heat. And so I know everybody's trying to develop sensors that are more lightweight and cheaper and very still high performance. And so they've taken this process for fabricating the intricate graphene patterns on the tape, and they create indented patterns on the surface of the polymer block, either with a molding process or 3D printing. And then they apply liquid graphene solution to the block, filling the indented patterns. And that way, when they remove it, the excess graphene then acts as the sensor, it acts as a strip. Have anybody done anything with that or know about it? And I think that's kind of a good thing to do, because it's hard to really tell how much water is being used or transpired, except by calculations and other ways. I think I'm not an expert like you ladies are in that area. Like I said, my background is electronics and physics, but Chris or anybody can.
Well, I think the goal here, or the challenge, has been to measure transpiration through a plant, right from the root. How does water move? How fast? How efficiently through the plant, from the roots up to the lower leaves and then up to the higher leaves, right? So
and it's got to be different from plant to plant.
Yeah, for the different crop, for the different time of year, for the soil that it's in, sun exposure, wind, solar radiation, all sorts of things affect that. But the basic measurement of how water moves in a plant is has lots and lots of different applications in terms of helping farmers.
But doing it at the source is probably the best.
Right. So in the past, there's been a lot of science around that, but they've measured it with making like 20 samples of plants and having them grow, and then measure the differences volumetrically up through the plant structure itself. When you do that, you have to cut the plant apart to either measure it, weigh it, or somehow define quantifiably what's in the structure of the plant. This new technology, as you described it better than I ever could because of your electronic background, what this does is allows us to put sensors in all parts of the plants so that we can measure that transpiration of water throughout the plant while the plant is alive and growing, without having to destroy the plant to take the measurements. That's the advantage.
I think this would help the theory of irrigation and how much you really need. I mean, to take this data and put it into some sort of algorithm and put that into a smart controller, I think would be advantageous to the farming industry. Is that a goal of what, like, you see, Natalie and Ingi?
Well, Natalie just mentioned a program called Crop Manage,
right,
which I think would incorporate, theoretically what the plant's using through the SIMUS project, and then farmers will have various instrumentation in the field to verify that that's correct. And I was just thinking, as far as plant-based measurements that farmers are using today, there are two that I know of, Thule that gives the plant measurement, and also a pressure bomb.
Right.
And then there's ways to test water in the soil, and then just weather-based. But so what I'm understanding is that graphene is like sensing at the molecular level, more than one plant sample like a pressure bomb would. And I don't, I guess if they could make it work, that would be fantastic. I don't know how it's communicating the data back to civilization, to read it. But I don't know, Natalie, have you ever heard of using graphene for irrigation moisture monitoring?
I have actually never heard of that. I also am just familiar with Thule and pressure bombs, and we have funded research on both of those. And I think the hindrance on those is that, again, with that irrigation scheduling, it's having someone in the field to take all of those samples. So you hit on a good point that could, that we often talk about in our research is how can this get to a point where we can be applicable to a field where it's not too expensive for growers to implement, because that really is something that matters at the end of the day to growers. And any technology that can increase efficiency is great, and then we always just have to think about that bottom line. So anything that's cost effective is great, but we have not worked with anything like that so far.
Who knows? Maybe you're going to get a graphene grant hit your desk sometime soon.
They're out there.
All this is so interesting to me. I mean, I never thought I would really want to know about this stuff, but I do. I mean, I like the science portion of that. So anyway,
Rob, I think we're rubbing off on you.
You are.
Oh, it's an awesome discussion tonight. Natalie, Rob and I were glued to the headphones.
Absolutely. In fact, we can't get them off. Anyway, I do want to again thank Ingy, Paul McFadden, Mike Barron, Chris Davies for being the team that helped make the show very good, and most importantly, our guests, such as Natalie. And I wish everybody a good week. We'll be back next week. And the most important thing for everybody listening to do is to think blue. Good night, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good week.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.